They thought they could lock me out of my own land until I found a way to own the road they stood on. That was the day everything changed. Not when they chained my ranch gate. Not when they laughed in my face at the emergency meeting. But when I realized the one road they used to control me could belong to me. Have you ever stood on the edge of your own property and felt like a trespasser? Watched strangers slam steel into your soil, bark rules they invented, and dare you to fight back? What would you do if the ground beneath your boots was yours, but they tried to rewrite that truth? Let me take you to the moment it all began. It was a dry August morning, the kind that blisters under the Oklahoma sun. I'd just finished checking the south pasture fences, half listening to the crackling AM radio while my dog, Rooster, trotted behind my four-wheeler. When we rounded the north bend by the creek, I saw it. 2 HOA men in reflective vests hammering posts into the dirt, right across the access road to my own front gate. They didn't see me yet. Just 2 silhouettes against the dusty sky hammering in sync. Clang, clang, clang. I cut the engine and listened. Rooster growled low. A heavy new chain stretched between 2 fresh poles. A gleaming silver padlock clamped it shut, right across the private road that fed into my driveway. Above it, a fresh white metal sign read, Private. HOA controlled access only. Unauthorized entry subject to fines. And underneath that, in bold black letters, monthly dues required for road use. I sat there for a few seconds, stunned. Then I rode up slow. They turned, surprised, probably expecting an Amazon truck or utility guy, not the man whose land lay just beyond that chain. Morning, I said, voice low and dry. You boys wanna explain why there's a chain across my driveway? The older one stepped forward, clipboard in hand. He was maybe 55, with a paunch that stretched his yellow vest. The younger one stayed behind him, gripping the hammer like he wasn't sure whether to hold or drop it. New access policy, the older one said. Unregistered vehicles past this point require a $300 monthly HOA road maintenance fee. It passed in the last board meeting. You'll get a copy of the resolution in your mailbox this week. I dismounted the four-wheeler slowly, not raising my voice. That road's been there since 1963. I've had deeded access for over 2 decades. You can't just block it. He gave me that smug HOA smile, half apology, half threat. You're technically on a community road, the association voted. It's majority rule, sir. I didn't speak, just stared at him for a long moment. Rooster padded to my side. You want the code for the padlock, he added, as if that made this okay. I didn't answer. I walked right up to the signpost, flicked the bottom of the metal plate with my knuckle. Fresh bolts, still warm. They'd done this just hours ago. The younger guy tried to fill the silence. It's not personal, man. Everyone's got to pay. Fair's fair. I turned to him, calm but firm. You're standing on my family's land. That post you hammered in, it's 3 feet into my deed line. He blinked. The road's public easement, right? No, I said flatly. It's a private easement, but it's not yours. That stopped them for a second. I didn't raise hell. I didn't make threats. I just turned, got back on the four-wheeler and rode around the long back trail, looping 10 extra minutes through my own pasture just to reach the house. As I pulled up to the porch, I saw the old survey markers half buried in the grass. A red ribbon still clung to one. That's when I knew. They hadn't just blocked a road. They'd crossed a line. My name is Wyatt Keller. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a politician. But I've spent enough time reading land deeds and oil lease maps to know when someone's trying to steal with a smile. I didn't storm the HOA office. I didn't rip down the chain or get in a yelling match. I went inside, poured a glass of sweet tea, and dug out the old deed folders from my grandfather's lockbox. And there it was. In plain ink, signed in 1984, the eastbound lane connecting the main county road to Parcel 4A shall remain a permanent deeded access right-of-way, recorded and protected under Title 60, Section 50. Parcel 4A was my land. That road, despite the association signage, was carved from an old cattle trail that predated the HOA by decades. And when my family sold off a portion of our ranch in the 80s, they granted a limited access easement for neighboring lots. Not the other way around. I called my land surveyor the next morning, sent him the scanned deed, and asked him to pull every access record he could find in the county registry. He called me back 2 days later. "Wyatt," he said, "you're not going to like this. The HOA filed a new plat claim 2 weeks ago. They're trying to retroactively mark the road as HOA-controlled common area. But here's the kicker." He paused. "They never finalized the transfer. That means the road's still technically part of the original subdivided ranch. It was never properly assigned to the HOA. It's an orphan parcel." I sat back in the kitchen chair, heart pounding. "So who owns it?" "Well," he said, "right now, legally, no one does. Which means it's for sale if you want it." I stared out the window past the pecan trees toward the road they'd tried to fence off. They blocked me out of a road they didn't even own. But I could. 3 days later, I was sitting in the county records office, filing the necessary paperwork to purchase the orphan parcel that included the entire half-mile road leading into the HOA neighborhood, right up to my own ranch gate. It cost me $8,000 in legal fees, filings, and a quiet bid the HOA never even knew existed. 2 weeks after that, I held the title in my hand. I didn't post signs. Not right away. I let them stew. They kept enforcing their fake rule. Sent me a final notice bill for $600 in road dues and a threat of legal action. I smiled and waited. Then, on the first Monday of the next month, I posted my sign. "Private road. Access subject to owner approval. HOA use. Permitted at triple maintenance rate. $900 month. Per property." And at the bottom, in smaller type, "Non-compliance. Subject to tow at owner's expense. See title deed ref 88273. New owner of parcel E." I installed a smart gate the next day. Quiet motor, keypad. Rooster watched the whole thing with his usual calm, tail wagging. That night, as the sun dipped below the tree line, I stood by the gate and watched the HOA president's black SUV roll up, brake hard, then reverse halfway down the road like it had hit a wall. I didn't wave. He didn't get out, but I saw his jaw working behind the glass, and I knew exactly what he'd seen. That was just the beginning. The real fight hadn't started yet. But they weren't the only ones with surprises. I had the law, I had the land, and now I had the leverage, and I was just getting started. By Thursday morning, the HOA president, Carl Dennison, stood on my side of the gate, uninvited. He wore that same smug expression, but this time it didn't quite hold. He kept tugging at the collar of his button-down like the air had gotten thick. Was out front raking gravel, casual as ever, Rooster sitting by the porch with his head tilted just slightly. Watching. Carl cleared his throat like a man used to being in control. "Mr. Keller," he said, with faux cordiality, "we'd like to discuss this signage of yours. There seems to be some confusion about property rights." I didn't answer right away. Let the silence stretch. "You're trespassing," I said eventually, without looking up. That made him blink. "Now hold on. I represent the—" "You're on parcel E," I interrupted, standing tall now, "which as of April 19th belongs to me. You're free to back your little crossover back across the cattle grid, or we can have the sheriff help you understand." His eyes narrowed. "This is obstruction. We've consulted legal counsel." "Good," I said. "You'll need them." I pulled a folded document from my back pocket, already notarized, recorded, and stamped with the county seal. I handed it to him without a word. He glanced at the title. Parcel E Acquisition and Private Access Rights Declaration, Recorded Deed, 88273. He read it once, twice. His lips moved like he was trying to disarm a landmine. This can't be legal." "It is," I said. "And so was your fake chain. So was your unauthorized signage. I've got photos, timestamps, GPS logs, and copies of every fake invoice you mailed me under false pretenses." I let that settle. Rooster let out a low rumble, not threatening, just present. Carl tried one more time. "We represent the majority. We voted for that road to be common ground. You're interfering with community mobility." I smiled. "You voted on land you didn't own. That road was never legally transferred to the HOA. The county let it drift into orphan status after the original developer's trust dissolved. You assumed it was yours because no one claimed it. He flinched at the word assumed. I continued. I did more than claim it. I bought it quietly, lawfully, and now it's mine. Back inside, I sent the first invoice. It was formatted professionally. Clear terms. Effective dates. Monthly charges for road use by each of the HOA's 32 properties. Tripled rates, just as they'd tried to charge me, plus a 10% administrative fee. Every single homeowner now owed me $900 per month for access to the only road leading into their neighborhood. I didn't expect them to pay. Not at first. This wasn't about collecting checks. This was about pulling the pin. Within 48 hours, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. They held it in their community rec hall, a prefab building paid for by dues they collected from retirees and weekenders who thought gated roads meant prestige. I didn't attend, but I heard from the inside. Two of the board members, a younger couple named Jenna and Alex Ramirez, sent me a quiet message on Facebook. We didn't vote for the chain. We didn't even know the plat was in dispute. They've been railroading meetings. It's all Carl's play. Let us know how we can help. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I submitted a formal notice of easement modification with the county land office. Now that I owned the road, I had the right to define terms of passage, and those terms were clear. Commercial entities using the road, like the lawn service Carl hired for HOA grounds, now required a $250 monthly permit. Non-compliance would result in physical blockage. My new gate had a remote lockdown system, camera feed, and a solar backup in case of power loss. Legal enforcement? Already arranged. I'd retained attorney Cassie Wren, a rural property specialist with a background in hostile land disputes. She was calm, lethal, and efficient. HOAs are paper tigers, she told me during our first call. They bluff 90% of the time. You've got the deed, the survey, and the statute. If they try to sue, we countersue for harassment and trespass. I asked her how often this kind of thing happened. She laughed. More than you'd believe, except usually it's the HOA doing the land grab. You flip the script. They won't see it coming. 2 weeks later, something unexpected happened. An elderly man named Bill Thornton knocked on my front door. Mid-70s. Retired firefighter. He lived 2 houses down from the gate. I recognized him from years back when he used to wave as he drove past. He didn't look angry, he looked tired. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, he said quietly. I never agreed to block your access. That whole chain stunt. Carl pushed it through at a closed-door board meeting. Most of us weren't even notified. I invited him in for coffee. He sat in the kitchen, stared out at the pasture while Rooster lay at his feet. I moved here 10 years ago because I thought it'd be peaceful, he said. Didn't realize I was signing up for a glorified country club with a dictator at the helm. I told him what I'd done, buying the road, setting the rates, enforcing the deed. He smiled. Good. He needed to be humbled. But the rest of us, we're just trying to live. I heard the plea behind his words, so I made a decision. I'll cut the rate, I said, for the homeowners who didn't vote for the roadblock. $50 a month flat, covers maintenance and admin, no penalties, no drama. He reached across the table, shook my hand, and that handshake became the crack that started the landslide. Within days, 8 more families reached out, then 13. They canceled their HOA auto dues and paid my minimal access fee instead. And Carl? Carl panicked. He issued violation notices to every resident who complied with the unauthorized road fee, claimed they were undermining community integrity. One woman forwarded me his email. It said, "Paying Mr. Keller is aiding an illegal seizure of neighborhood infrastructure. All participants will face citations, fines, and possible liens." I forwarded it to Cassie. Her reply was immediate. "That's defamation. Send me a list of everyone he threatened. We're filing a cease and desist tomorrow." And we did. By week's end, Carl was no longer in control of the narrative. He'd tried to paint me as the villain. but the truth leaked through cracks he couldn't seal. Residents realized the road had never legally belonged to them. The HOA had built its policies on sand. I was offering better terms, clearer rights, and no fake fines. Then came the real blow. My attorney filed a temporary injunction against the HOA to prevent them from collecting further road-related dues until ownership could be clarified in court. And because the ownership was already legally recorded in my name, the judge sided with me. The HOA was banned from issuing road use fees. They lost their biggest revenue stream overnight. Carl showed up at my gate one last time. He buzzed the intercom. I watched from the porch, didn't answer. He stood there 5 full minutes. Then he left. The next week he resigned as HOA president. No apology, no explanation, just a letter stapled to the rec hall bulletin board. A new board was elected within days. The Ramirezes, they took over. And their first act? Voting to dissolve the HOA entirely. It wasn't just a win for me. It was a shift in the land's balance. Where once a man with a clipboard had stood in my soil and declared authority, now the land spoke for itself. The road belonged to the ranch, again. The gate stood quiet but unyielding, and those who'd once tried to trap me behind it now waited politely for it to open. They thought the gate was the end of the fight. It was only the start of the reckoning. Carl's resignation didn't stop the wheels I'd set in motion. In fact, it cleared the path. Without his iron grip throttling the board, the new leadership started talking. And the more they opened up, the more I realized this wasn't just about a gate, a chain, or a stretch of county-forgotten asphalt. Carl Dennison had been running the HOA like a personal fiefdom, and his empire was rotting from the inside. The IE, Paper Trail Cassie, my attorney, was already compiling documentation for a full civil suit. But then Jenna Ramirez, the newly elected HOA board president, called me privately. "I think there's something you should see," she said. "Meet me at the rec hall tonight. Bring your lawyer." It was 8:47 p.m. when I arrived, rain in the air, the smell of fresh creosote from the fence posts. The community rec hall lights flickered weakly, like they were already preparing to go dark. Jenna was waiting inside with a small cardboard file box. "Carl's records," she said. "He left them behind when he resigned. Thought he'd erased everything digital. But we found these in the locked cabinet." Cassie opened the lid, like it might bite. Inside, contracts, payment ledgers, HOA checkbooks, and one slim manila folder with Carl's name scribbled in red ink. She flipped through page after page, brow furrowing. "Holy hell," she muttered. Turns out, Carl had been overbilling landscaping services by hiring his nephew's fake company and pocketing 40% of the checks, issuing fines to non-compliant residents and waiving them only after they agreed to pay for his legal advice, which turned out to be a Word document downloaded from Reddit. Skimming dues by routing monthly fees through an LLC he quietly registered out of state, one that had no official connection to the HOA charter. Cassie looked up. He's guilty of embezzlement, fraud, wire fraud, possibly, if any of these. Payments were made online. And if residents were coerced, we might have a RICO predicate. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I stared at the sheet of paper she was holding. One name stood out in the payment logs. Keller, a $1,200 special compliance assessment that Carl had issued under my name, 6 months before the gate incident. It was labeled Refused Livestock Boundary Review. I had never received a bill. I'd never heard of the charge. He had been laying the groundwork for retaliation all along. Q. Going public the next morning, I made 3 calls. First to Cassie, to prepare a civil suit with exhibits. Second, to a local investigative journalist named Martin Gleason. He ran a small YouTube channel and blog that covered corruption in rural communities. Not flashy, but real. The kind of man who carried a press badge and a pitchfork in the same truck bed. And third, to Sheriff Doyle. Sheriff Doyle had known me for 20 years. We'd hunted whitetail together back in the early 2000s. More than once I'd pulled his truck out of a ditch during the late spring floods. He wasn't flashy either, but he was fair. I emailed him copies of the financials and let Cassie follow up. His response? Immediate. By noon, deputies had visited Carl Dennison's property with a notice to appear. No arrests, yet. But the warning was clear. Cooperate, or things escalate. Carl, of course, lawyered up. Hired a city firm with a flashy logo and a lot of noise. Didn't help. By Friday, Martin's story went live. The headline read, "Retired Rancher Buys Back Stolen Road, Uncovers Years of HOA Fraud in Rural Texas Hamlet." It hit like lightning. The video racked up 60,000 views in 24 hours. Not viral by city standards, but explosive for a town where the diner's chalkboard sign still listed beef tips and Wi-Fi as the day's special. More importantly, it woke people up. Retirees who had blindly mailed HOA checks started checking their statements. Widows who'd been fined for unsanctioned garden flags realized they were owed refunds. And young families, like the Ramirez's, finally had proof they weren't. Crazy that the HOA's intimidation had been real. People started filing claims. Cassie helped them bundle together under a class action civil suit. 31 homeowners joined, and suddenly, Carl wasn't facing one angry rancher. He was facing an entire community, unified, documented, and done being afraid. The public hearing. 3 weeks later, the county council held a public hearing to review the HOA's legitimacy. It was meant to be a quiet formality. It turned into a storm. Carl tried to appear via Zoom, citing personal safety concerns. The council denied the request. He was forced to show up in person. He arrived late, wore sunglasses indoors, avoided eye contact. I sat 3 rows behind him, said nothing, just listened. The hearing began with a dull summary of land records. Then, the microphone passed to Cassie. She stood, adjusted her jacket, and began calmly. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the board, what began as a land rights dispute over an abandoned county easement has revealed something far uglier beneath the surface. We have documented misuse of HOA funds, unapproved rate hikes, falsified compliance assessments, and fabricated enforcement letters, all signed or initiated by Mr. Carl Dennison." She didn't shout, didn't need to. She simply handed over Exhibit A, the payment ledger, then Exhibit B, sworn affidavits from 15 homeowners, and finally, Exhibit C, the county clerk's confirmation that Parcel E, the road in question, had never been officially conveyed to the HOA, rendering all enforcement actions based on that road legally null. Carl tried to object, mumbled something about procedural irregularities. The board cut him off. "You were the irregularity," said Councilwoman Teresa Lynn, "and you owe this community an apology, at minimum." The council voted 5-0 to revoke the HOA's charter pending investigation. Carl stood and walked out without a word. That was the last time I ever saw him in person. The financial fallout. When the HOA dissolved, it left behind a mess. There were unpaid landscaping contracts, refunds to be issued, and legal obligations to residents who'd been improperly fined. But here's where it gets beautiful. Cassie helped the new neighborhood co-op form a replacement organization, not a homeowners association, but a mutual easement collective. Voluntary, transparent, no power to fine, only to manage basic upkeep. I signed on as a vendor, not a member. They paid me monthly, fairly, to maintain the road I owned. No more gate drama. No more threats. And the community? They thrived. Kids played in front yards without worrying about fence height violations. Elderly neighbors planted tomato beds with pride, not paranoia. And the Ramirez's? They planted native wildflowers along the newly repaired gravel shoulders. Where there had once been control, now there was color. Carl? Well, according to Martin's follow-up report, his case went federal after the money trail crossed state lines. The out-of-state LLC he'd been laundering HOA funds through, it tied back to 3 other communities, and 2 of them were already filing criminal charges. Last I heard, he was awaiting trial in a Houston holding facility. Guess the gate swung shut for him too. Some wars end with sirens. Mine ended with sunflowers. It had been 6 months since the council revoked the HOA charter. Carl Dennison was under federal investigation. The road was quiet again. No more chain, no more watchful stares from HOA. Patrol trucks that used to idle at the edge of my ranch like buzzards on a fence. What they didn't realize until it was too late was that the gate they tried to block me behind had only ever been the front door to something bigger. A reckoning. And now the dust had settled, but I wasn't quite done yet. A different kind of payback. Most people thought I took satisfaction in buying the road. And yes, I won't lie, it felt good. But the real victory wasn't financial, it was psychological. Wanted to make it so the next time someone thought about throwing their weight around behind a fake badge and a clipboard, they'd pause. Just long enough to think, what if the guy behind that gate isn't just some rancher? Because it turns out, no one checked who I was before they messed with me. Not really. They saw the flannel shirts, the dirt under my nails, the cattle trailer out front, and assumed that meant simple. But they didn't see the years I spent in the oil industry negotiating easements, or the 2 decades I worked as a regional land commissioner for the state, writing boundary law and zoning clauses that people like Carl abused without even understanding. I wrote the kind of loopholes he tried to exploit. So when I bought that street, it wasn't just a flex, it was a warning, whispered to every HOA board that might try to copy Carl. This isn't just gravel, it's jurisdiction. 2. The town rebuilds by early spring. The mutual easement collective Jenna had helped organize was fully active. No mandatory dues, just voluntary monthly contributions, no fines, just gentle neighbor-to-neighbor accountability, instead of weaponizing. Bylaws, they built bridges. The new community map listed my road as privately owned public access PAPA. That meant the road was still open to all residents, but with my consent. And I had one condition. Every child in the neighborhood got to paint a stone and line it along the road's shoulders. It started with just a few. Hand-sized rocks with smiley faces and names: Tommy, Jess, Luna. Then came sunflowers, footballs, a bald eagle, a few awkward attempts at Batman. By summer, the full stretch of road had become a kind of winding mural, one that wrapped past my ranch gate like a ribbon, tied around a healed wound, the gate itself still there, but wide open, always theirs threed. Cassie's final letter. On the first day of July, I got a letter from Cassie, typed neatly on firm linen paper, no frills, just the facts. Final resolution of civil suit. Dear Mr. Keller, I am pleased to inform you that the settlement negotiations concluded last night. The class action lawsuit brought against Mr. Carl Dennison and his related LLCs has been accepted for judgment in district court. Carl has agreed to repay $163,000 in misappropriated funds to affected residents, forfeit all property holdings in the 3 subdivisions tied to the fraud, issue a public notarized apology, under court order. Additionally, due to the discovery of a fraudulent lien attempt filed in your name during the gate dispute, you will be awarded a separate $45,000 in personal damages. Carl's sentencing hearing is scheduled for September 4th. Respectfully, Cassandra Fields. Escort. I sat at the kitchen table a long while after reading it, didn't smile, didn't cheer, just stared out the window at the road he once tried to weaponize, and now couldn't even step foot on without my permission. Foo. The final apology, it came in the form of a PDF, publicly filed, court-mandated, but real. Carl Dennison wrote, I abused my position, knowingly falsified documents, and used fear to control a neighborhood that deserved better. I am deeply sorry to all the families I misled, intimidated, or financially harmed. I owe a particular apology to Mr. Keller, whose integrity, patience, and quiet strength exposed my wrongdoing and protected this community from further abuse. I was wrong. He was right. Carl J. Dennison, July 18th. Printed it out, framed it, and mounted it on the back of my gate, not as a trophy, as a reminder. For every kid riding their bike past those painted stones. For every father who's ever been underestimated. And for every neighbor who ever felt silenced by a clipboard and a laminated badge. that sometimes the loudest justice is done in quiet power. Legacy and the next fight people started calling me after that. Ranchers from other counties, single moms dealing with rogue HOAs, veterans who just wanted to plant a flag without being fined for visual obstructions. They didn't want revenge. They wanted to breathe. And I realized, maybe this wasn't just a one-time thing. Maybe this was a blueprint, so I started speaking at town halls, teaching folks how to read easements, how to look up plat maps, how to fight back without yelling, and I kept my road open. Always. Unless someone tried to chain it again. But they won't. Not after what happened. Because in a town that once bowed to bureaucracy, people remembered something far older and stronger than any HOA charter. Land remembers. And it listens to those who love it enough to defend it. Final line echoes Section 1's tone. The gate's still there. Rust on the hinges, kids' stones lining the edge, and a quiet wind that hums through the trees. And every morning when I pass through it, I nod once, not in anger, not in pride, just in quiet thanks, that they tried to block me, because it reminded me what I was truly made of.